All right, so how to write great author bios and book descriptions. Mark Twain, if you go in and look at some of his books right now, they're just all over the board in as far as whether they're following the rules that the masters put out or not. So um, anyway, why is your bio important? Well, if somebody comes to your door, knocking on your door, you have a split second to make that first impression, or the person who's knocking on your door coming to visit you. Your bio may take a very well, excuse me, somebody just came in here. It takes a long time to read a book, but it's very easy to make that snap decision on a short paragraph. So we're going to talk about how to make it short, how to make it meaningful. But that, other than it being a first impression, it solidifies your reputation. In other words, how do you know, or how can you tell your potential reader that you know what you're talking about? If you're writing fiction or nonfiction, what makes you such a pro or such an expert at this? So your bio will help to solidify that reputation. And if you're self-publishing, it really does help you to establish your brand. Every author has to have a brand. And so that's something you need to really develop and think about. And think about this, that many people or more people will read your bio than they do your book. Hey, have you ever done that before? Have you ever been in a store, you turn it over, you look at the bio, read it and say, and you put it back. I do. I read the bios, and some of them are rather catchy and funny, and we'll get into that. If you decide to go traditional publishing, you have an agent to go through, you have an editor, usually 2 or 3 editors before they even accept your book. These editors and agents have really tight deadlines, so they don't want to read a long bio, even the long synopsis, unless they ask for you to send a 2-page thing. It's very short. They ask you, send 1 paragraph. Think of it as an elevator pitch. How long does it take you to get from floor 1 to floor 2? That's the length of time that you have to tell your bio. When we had these conferences in person, the writing conferences, if you ever got in the elevator alone with Jerry Jenkins, you wanted to be able to tell him what your book is about before you got to the next floor. Because if you bore him, he's off, whether he's going off or not. He's going to be off that elevator. So you have to make that elevator pitch really a quick thing. So as an author, you always need at least 2 bios, at least. Your first generic one that you're going to put on your author central page, and hopefully you all are working on an author central page on Amazon. Your website, your Facebook author page, your LinkedIn page, your Goodreads. There's that generic, all about who you are. But then there has to be a separate bio for each one of your books, because you may write, I've written 3 memoirs, and they're each different in that my first memoir is about my childhood on the farm. My 3rd memoir was more about my mom. And so I had to kind of tweak the bio for each book there. And you'll have to, and you may even go into different genres. I've recently gone into doing puzzle books and journals. So that bio is a little different too. Okay, so steps to writing the author bio. There's a bio form, and we're going to go through each one of these. The format, who's your audience, your background, always be truthful, show your personality, achievements, awards, personalize it, and be relevant. Okay, so we're going to go through each one of these. All right, bio format. It's always written in 3rd person. She, Judy Watters, you always 3rd person. never I. Don't ever use I in it. 75 to 150 words max. If it goes any more than that, it's going to end up being boring. You start by write everything. Just write everything you want to write, and then go back and cut out your being verbs. Am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. Those are your 8 being verbs. You cut those being verbs out, and you cut out all adjectives, any ly words. It just makes it too wordy. And you can make concise, shorter sentences. Will cause for a person's eye to keep going instead of really long sentences too. Okay, know your readers. Who is your audience? When you think of your book, who is that ideal person who would come and pick up your book or see it on Amazon? And who is it? What age range? Is it young adult, YA? Is it children? If it's young children, then your audience is really the parents or the grandparents. If it's mine, I think is more for, at least my memoir, I think are more for the baby boomers, that group of people. You can write your bio out and take it to social media or take it to your beta readers. A beta reader, if you're not familiar with a beta reader, you can find a free one on Goodreads. There are groups of people who love to read, and they just read everything they get their hands on. And so you can submit your book, your manuscript to them, email it to them, and then they will read it and give you their honest opinion. Be prepared, because it will be an honest opinion. Many times, now they're not going to edit it. They're not going to mark it up for punctuation or anything like that. What they're going to come back and tell you is things like, you lost me between chapter 2 and 3. The transition between 5 and 6 was, or you mentioned a red dress in chapter 2, but at the end of chapter 2, it was a blue dress that matched her eyes. So they catch things like that. So beta readers are very important. There are groups on Goodreads that will charge money. I think I paid $7 one time for a beta reader, but what you get back is good. So take your bio to the beta reader and ask them. You can also take it to your friends, relatives, people who really know you, and say, does my bio sound like me? Because you really do want to have that personal touch. When you put something about your background, it doesn't have to be a lot. You can list your other books, maximum of 3. Education, if it's pertinent to your book. If you happen to be writing a book about mathematics or whatever, you want to list the education that tells your reader why you're so intelligent about this subject. Memberships, if you are the president of the Association of American Christian Fiction Writers, then that might be important to your Christian novel. So pertinent info, what else is pertinent to this book? Be truthful. So many authors have been found out here. Stick to facts you can prove. I know there have been several people who have written bios of, well, one in particular that he started all these orphanages in Ethiopia, and it was the farthest thing from the truth, and he was found out. So be very careful what you say here. Show your personality. If readers like you, they're more apt to enjoy what you write. Be goofy, maybe. Be creative. Have fun with your bio. Achievements, awards, again, only if it's relevant to this book. You may say, I have 250,000 Twitter followers or blog followers. You could say it that way, but only if it's true and only if it has relevance to this book. You can, even if you haven't won any awards, you can say you were nominated for an award. You want to keep off Dean's List or voted most likely to succeed. No one cares, okay? So, keep it very pertinent to the book. And personalize it. Family, location. This is at the very end of your bio. You'll want to add something about your family, where you live. Maybe I live in Texas. You wouldn't say I live in Cypress Springs and in Comal County, and you don't want to get into those weeds. And hobbies and interests, if it's relevant, or if it makes you sound more down to earth, more whatever it has to do with your book. If you're writing about having been a part of a cult, that might go in your bio. If you're writing about divorce and you've been married 5 times, that might be pertinent to that, but that's all up to you. Make sure it's relevant to this book. Okay, variations, as I said, different for each book or each genre. For my puzzle books, my journals, the bio is different. May need shorter for social media. If you put it on Facebook, they only ask for so many words. I think Twitter, of course, your bio is much shorter there. Sometimes you can have a longer one. If they allow for a longer one, then go ahead and fill it up, but not to the point where you're going to bore people. All right. Okay. Let me go through just a few of these. This one is short. It's who she is, what she writes. It's personal, shows personality. Jenna Morrissey is a best-selling author of dark fantasy and science fiction, as well as a YouTube sensation with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. The Savior's Champion, her first novel in the Savior's series, was voted one of the best books of all time by Book Depository. Born and raised in Silicon Valley, Jenna spends her free time laughing until her face hurts with her goofball fiance and snuggling with her tiny dog. Okay, that last part shows personality. It's short. The whole thing is short. You know who she is, what she writes. You see a little glimpse of her personality. Here's another short bio. Lynn Vincent is a New York Times best-selling writer of Heaven is for Real and Same Kind of Different as Me. I've read both of those. They're excellent. The author and co-author of 10 books, Lynn has sold 12 million copies since 2006. She worked for 11 years as a writer and editor of the national news biweekly World Magazine and is a U.S. Navy veteran. Okay, that's all it's very short, very concise. So now here's some funny ones. And when you're rich and famous and you have all the accolades behind you, you can do silly things like this. Tom McLaughlin, please buy my book. I owe people money. And Joyce Carol Oates, we all know her as a poet, just author, okay? Joanna Penn, if you have not subscribed to her podcast, you should. She's on YouTube, she's on podcasts. She is awesome. She writes about marketing, book writing. She interviews a lot of different authors, but she is excellent. I won't read that. It's just kind of tells a whole lot about her. Mindy Kaling, she wrote Why Not Me? Mindy Kaling lives in rural New Hampshire and does not own a TV. Okay. Now this one, I don't know why it works. I don't know. But he says, Michael Lewis, the author of Boomerang, Liar's Poker, The New Thing, Moneyball, The Blind Side, Panic, Home Game, and The Big Short, among other works, lives in Berkeley, California with his wife, Tabitha Soren, and their 3 children. I don't know why he would put all those, but I mean, this guy is well known. I'm not going to knock it, but there's just a whole lot of variety when it comes to author bios. Here's some funny ones. Or Eric Carle, humorous. He's a humorous writer. Invented writing, the airplane, and the internet. He was also the first person to reach the North Pole. He's flown to Mars and back in one day, was enthusiastically greeted by the Martians, very strange beings. He reported on his return. He reported on his return. He has written 1,000 highly regarded books. A team of experts is presently attempting to grasp their meaning. It might take a century, said the chief expert. Carl is also a great teller of stories, but not all of them are true. For instance, those in this book. He is famous anyway, so he can write whatever he wants to write. So it may not work for us at our point in this. Okay, so here we are. If you want to unmute yourself, ask any questions on author bios, we'll take a few minutes to do that. Anyone? If not, we will just go on. Okay. Oh, Celeste?
Oh, I just wanted to comment. Most of them were pretty short.
Yes.
Compared to some of the ones I've read, in books or in the back of books.
Yeah. Just have to be careful because they say very short, but you need to say everything you want to say, or not everything you want to say, everything you need to say to tell your prospective purchaser of your book what they're going, who they're getting. Not what they're getting, but who are they getting?
Right.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So the importance of a great book description. Now on Amazon, it's your best marketing tool. In bookstores, usually when you get in bookstores, you pick up the book, you turn it over, and you read that author bio. I do anyway. An author bio stands out, especially in Google and Amazon searches. It's a sales, once again, that elevator pitch. But we'll find a lot of variety here too. When we go to Amazon, we're going to take a look at Amazon in a few minutes, but there's such a variety out there. And we have to remember that with Amazon, when we go in, there's just a little snippet that you see of the book description, and then it says, read more. And you have to click that for the rest of that description to come on. So that first part has to be right on and a real grabber. General guidelines. Again, keep it simple, keep it short, use some power words. And you can go to Google search and just go to your URL, put in power words, and it comes with a whole list of words for you to use. But if you can use power words to describe what's going on in your book, to keep out those being verbs. Remember, we're not going to use being verbs in your bio or in your description. However, we see people breaking that rule all the time. So make it thought-provoking or tense, depending on what type of book you're writing, and leave the reader with a cliffhanger at the end. You have to have that that grabber, that line that's going to make people read the second line. So here's one, a moving story of family, friendship, and finding forgiveness as a good headline. As I said, Amazon only gives a few lines there at the top. Some people I've seen start with a quote or maybe a short review. Don't ever start with, have you ever done this? Because if the person has never done that, then they're going to say, nope, go on to the next thing. But a short review, you could even have a relative or a friend say something kind about your book and you write it down. And so that goes, it was a review. So you put that down as your top line. It has to be a snappy hook. Use keywords. Now, keywords would be a whole nother webinar. But keywords are what people put in the Amazon search engine and Google search engine to find the type of genre they're looking for. So it may be politics. What would you put in to the search engine if you're looking for a mystery, a medical mystery? You'd put in medical mystery. Or you'd put in, maybe you want memoir. Maybe you want I don't know, serial killer stories, some mysteries, whatever. You put that in there. Those are all keywords, and they're very important. So, nonfiction, two different types of book descriptions here. Nonfiction has to tell who you are. How are you the expert in your field? And then you paint a picture of the problem. You have to give them the problem before you solve it for them. So again, keywords are heavy here: weight loss, politics, medicine. Use those keywords throughout the description. And then the wrap up towards the end. Now that you've created this problem, how does your book solve that problem? What's in it for the reader? What's that takeaway? And remember that nonfiction, the reader will connect with the author. In fiction, the reader connects with your protagonist, usually, unless they're weird and they will connect with your antagonist. So, okay, so where were we? That's nonfiction. All right, then fiction. Lead with the protagonist. Put some line, your first line should have something about your protagonist, and then go into the primary conflict, like one sentence. What's that primary conflict? Then the stakes. So what's going to happen if the protagonist doesn't win out in the end? But in our description, we have to be so careful not to tell too much. In the wrap up towards the end, we have to have strong positive reviews. Again, if you have a critique group or you have a friend who's read it and just have raved over, even if it's, not, even if it was verbal, go ahead and write it down and you can use that. Or maybe a beta reader has really raved about it. Get that beta reader's review written down. You can also mention that there are similarities to your book, to other books. Like my first memoir, in my description, I said it was a cross between Little House on the Prairie and Green Acres. So people from that baby boomer stage, they know what Green Acres was, and they know what Little House on the Prairie. So they put it together and they can visualize, oh, it's a humorous, down-to-earth book. Kind of funny type thing. Why do I keep going back and forth? Sorry. Okay, so did I finish everything? Strong positive. Okay, similarities. Okay, the audience. Here, very at the end of your book description, you want to write something that will spur them on to make that purchase. Makes a great gift for YA readers. Oh, I have a niece who might like this. So when you just put that in their head and they say, oh yeah, I do. So again, reader connects with the character in fiction. So you have to make that character likable. All right, so for both fiction and nonfiction, you're going to end with a call to action. Scroll up and click buy now. That's your call to action. Short paragraphs in fiction, bulleted list in nonfiction. 250 words max. That's not a lot of words, but be sure to use the keywords throughout. Keywords are also helpful in your subtitle. If you have it, not all books have subtitles, but if yours does, it would be good to put keywords there. Also HTML, and we'll see this. I just recently learned about this, but it helps to make things stand out. You can bold things. When you make your list, it looks a lot cleaner. And I'll show you when we get to Amazon. This section here, the B, is when you want to bold and then unbold. And here's a break and unbreak. Here's when you want to make a list. All right. Icons help too. And we'll get into that in the Amazon. But don't use time-sensitive language like coming soon or releases in the fall. My next book 2 is released in the fall, or my book 4 is forthcoming. Those are time-sensitive words. You don't want to use those. Okay. Have any of you read Where the Crawdads Sing? Oh my goodness, you have to. Eugenia, you have? Yes. Celeste, you need to read it. Okay, so this is a must. All right, so I want to show you how she changed her book description over time. For years, rumors of the Marsh Girl have haunted Barclay Cove, a quiet town on the North Carolina coast. So in late 1969, when handsome Chase Andrews is found dead, the locals immediately suspect Kaya Clark, the so-called Marsh Girl. But Kaya is not what they say. Sensitive and intelligent, she has survived for years alone in the marsh that she calls home, finding friends in the gulls and lessons in the sand. Then the time comes when she yearns to be touched and loved. When two young men from town become intrigued by her wild beauty, Kaya opens herself to a new life until the unthinkable happens. Where the Crawdads Sing is at once an exquisite ode to the natural world, a heartbreaking coming-of-age story, and a surprising tale of possible murder. Owens reminds us that we are forever shaped by the children we once were, and that we are all subject to the beautiful and violent secrets that nature keeps. Now, that was the end of her first, when it first came out. Now, they have added to it, and they've added this last part. Owen's debut novel has been on the New York Times bestseller list for 89 weeks and counting. While these lists are not a proper measure of quality, if you've read Where the Crawdads Sing, you know it's an incredible novel. So anyway, that's an example of how she changes, how it changes over time. So here we go with this. The Mark Edwards wrote The Retreat paperback. He's written several other books. But notice here on the Amazon, an Amazon charts bestseller. That's an awesome thing to be able to say. Notice how the first two lines are bolded. That's the HTML. If you just bolded it in Word, it wouldn't come out. You have to bold it with HTML. So he's on Amazon. All right, and then it says read more. And when you read more, you know, it's not that awfully long. Notice how it's spaced. So descriptions, it's really a good idea. If you have so much writing, especially with fiction, you end up with a lot of writing as opposed to nonfiction where you have lists. It's good to break it up like that. Okay. And she says, a missing child, a desperate mother, and a house full of secrets. That's a grabber. That should grab you to say, oh, I want to learn more. So you go on. 2 years ago, Julia lost her family in a tragic accident. Okay. It's supposed to tell just enough. Okay.